The SS Algoma was built in 1883 by Aiken and Mansell in Glasgow, Scotland, for use by the Canadian Pacific Railway Company. The Algoma was 262 feet long, with a 38-foot beam, a depth of 23 feet, and she had a gross registered tonnage of 1,750 tons as she was originally constructed. The Algoma was powered by a compound steam engine driving a single screw, and she had 2 masts in case of engine failure. The ship was designed to accommodate 240 first-class passengers and 500 in steerage. The Canadian Pacific ordered 3 ships from Aiken: the Athabasca, which launched on July 3, 1883, the Alberta, which launched on July 12th, and the Algoma, which launched on July 31st. These 3 ships were identical. The company had intended to use the ship as a passenger vessel on the Great Lakes, running from Thunder Bay on Lake Superior to Owen Sound on Lake Huron. The Alberta and Algoma sailed from Glasgow on September 25th, taking 13 days to cross the Atlantic and arrive in Montreal, Quebec. However, ships of the Algoma size were too long to pass through the Welland Canal. So, the SS Algoma was actually cut in half, with the bow and stern moved through the canal separately on pontoons. The ship was later rejoined in Buffalo, New York, and the cabins were added. This increased the tonnage to 1,773 tons. Also, additional work was done on the cabins during the winter of 1883 to 1884, including the installation of electric lighting on the SS Algoma and her sister ships. These ships were probably the first Great Lakes ships to be electrified, although from my previous video we also know that the SS Kirby was actually the first one. The newly fitted SS Algoma came in at $450,000 to build and was relaunched on May 11, 1884. The 3 Canadian Pacific steamers immediately set time records for their runs. The SS Algoma clocked 39 hours and 42 minutes on the run between Owen Sound and Thunder Bay, and journeyed from Toronto to Thunder Bay in an unprecedented short amount of time, 47 hours. On November 5th, 1885, the SS Algoma left Owen Sound for Thunder Bay. She was carrying general merchandise, railroad supplies, and 37 passengers. This was the fewest that she had ever carried. This was more than likely attributed to the lateness of the season and the recent opening of a rail route around Lake Superior. The Algoma passed into Lake Superior on November 6th. When it was about halfway across the lake, it ran into a blinding snowstorm. The sails were set to stabilize the ship, but it drifted off course. At about 4 a.m. on the morning of November 7th, the captain of the Algoma ordered the sails to be lowered and change course. At 4:40 a.m., shortly after resuming steam power, the SS Algoma ran aground on the southeast shore of Motte Island, or Mote Island, off of Isle Royale. The Algoma was grounded so that the waves pummeled the bow section. At about 6 a.m., the ship broke in two, with the stern grounded on the shore and the bow drifting off. Many of the Algoma's passengers and crew were swept away, but 3 people made it to shore, which was about 50 feet or so, and another 11 remained in the bow section of the Algoma until the morning of November 8th, when the storm finally subsided. The survivors all got to shore on November 8th and stayed that night with a party of fishermen. On November 9th, the Athabasca was intercepted and the survivors were taken on to Thunder Bay. In total, 46 people died in the wreck of the SS Algoma. there were 14 survivors, including 2 passengers, and 11 crewmen, and the captain. A search party returned to Isle Royale on November 10th, but only found 2 bodies. However, more bodies and cargo were located in the subsequent months that followed. The sheer force of the storm was such that nearly all cargo was smashed, and only some portions of bodies were found as the waves had dashed them to pieces against the rocks. And some of the sections of the SS Algoma were completely flattened. The wreck of the SS Algoma was the worst loss of life in the history of Lake Superior shipping. Much of the stern of the ship was salvaged in 1886, and much of the bow was either salvaged or drifted away into Lake Superior. The engine from the ship was used in the passenger steamer Manitoba, which launched in 1889. The SS Manitoba was used for nearly 60 years on the Great Lakes before being decommissioned, and an additional salvage operation was carried out in 1903. What little remains of the SS Algoma is widely scattered in 15 to 100 feet of water. Some of the portions of the ship and the stern are all that remain on the site. The wreckage near shore is primarily distributed in 3 fields, each 100 feet apart. Various pieces of the ship's equipment, including pieces of a mast, pipes, valves, and davits, are visible, as well as some passenger artifacts as well are still there. Much of the wreckage is in relatively shallow water, and lake action regularly rearranges the artifacts visible. Only a few pieces of wreckage have been located far offshore in deeper water. These may have been from the missing bow section that drifted off. The SS Algoma is the least visited wreck in the Isle Royale National Park, with approximately 10 dives, give or take, in 2009, out of 1,062 dives that have been made to the wrecks in the park. What an interesting story of the SS Algoma, being that close to shore and yet being smashed by the ferocity of the waves on the rocks, and then being ripped apart, only to have passengers and crew members on the ship being drifted off and sinking into Lake Superior. Goodness, that must have been a horrifying event. To be so close to shore yet to be taken away from it, and also in a snowstorm as well. I know the conditions on Lake Superior and in Michigan can get very, very cold, and especially the waves and the size of the waves and the weather and the wind as well. It just tragic factors that all come together, bringing about the end of a lot of ships on the Lake Superior here. I think there's around 350 to 400, maybe more, shipwrecks that have occurred that we know of, at least, on Lake Superior. What could have prevented this? I don't know if the ship was overloaded or maybe it was just poor navigation. Tell me what you guys think in the comments section below. This Algoma, SS Algoma, was again another shipwreck that I had never heard of or story happening. However, that will do it for this video and story on the SS Algoma. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I do make this video in honor and memory of the people and crew members that lost their lives on this ship. Do look forward to the next video, and as always, I enjoy this very much, and bringing these stories and the lives of the people aboard them to you guys in a educational and informal way, and also, as always, a very respectful way as well. Thank you very much, and God bless you. See you next time on Songs of the Great Lakes.